Well, it looks like there might be breaking news right as the show goes live at exactly 7 o'clock. So that would make sense. Yep, just now reported Florida Gators Live 16. Florida is hiring Darren Wilson to coach the corners. We were expecting this a little bit. We didn't know if it was going to happen now or tomorrow or if it was like a guarantee thing. But the Gators will be hiring Darren Wilson to become the new corners coach, replacing Will Harris, who had just left. Tyler, what is your initial reaction to this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly one of the names that we thought was pretty high on this list. I mean, it seems like a fine replacement. Comes in, was just hired as the defensive coordinator at Georgia State, but was previously spent the 2024 season as the defensive backs coach at Arkansas. So, brings SEC experience to the table. Was good enough to get hired as a G5 coordinator. So seems like a solid move. This is the second, recently hired G5 coordinator that the Gators have plucked to kind of come be a position coach. Obviously, in the case of Vinny Cincinnati, it was to be co-DC as well, but mostly focusing on being a position coach. So, yeah, I mean, it seems like as solid a hire as you're going to make, especially a little bit later on here than you'd ideally like to be making staff moves.
Yeah, it seems like Darren Wilson is a guy who has been like moving up quick, kind of like how Vinny Sunseri is. I mean, look at Darren Wilson. He became the defensive coordinator for McNeese State in 2020 and that 2021 season. He then gets hired by Florida to be a quality control for the cornerbacks in Billy's first year. Right from there, he's hired as a secondary coach for the Arkansas Razorbacks. So that's a big jump right there, going from a quality control assistant to a defensive staffer for an SEC program. He then just got hired to become the defensive coordinator, as you mentioned, for Georgia State. I have a quote from Arkansas. After making an impact on the Arkansas secondary in his first season, Darren Wilson returns for his second season, working with the Razorback secondary. The Hog secondary was arguably the most improved unit on the team in 2023. I mean, that's some pretty good praises for him, talking about his unit arguably being the most improved. Had some All-American SEC All-Players like Dwight McGlothern, I'm pretty sure, who then went to LSU. Right? Am I getting that right?
Started at LSU
Started
and
LSU,
then went to Arkansas.
Okay. So flipped, but yeah. Again, getting players, turning them to all SEC level players, then they move up a little bit. So it seems like he's a guy that can develop and has improved rooms. I mean, that's some pretty high praise there, calling it the most improved unit for the Arkansas team.
Yeah, certainly, like you said, big jump going from quality control to a position coach in the SEC in one season. Also had pretty good success as the defensive coordinator at McNeese. So, yeah, I mean, makes sense. A guy that kind of is tied to Billy in multiple ways, in the sense that worked under him previously at Florida, and then also didn't coach under him at Louisiana, but they both coached in the state of Louisiana at the same time. So there was a little bit of, I'm sure Billy was aware of him from that too. So yeah, I mean, again, seems like a solid hire. I don't know that Arkansas's defensive backs were like the most incredible group in the country this year, but I think it's as solid as you could get. I think losing Will Harris was a bummer. I mean, I've seen people posting the PFF grades trying to like argue that maybe he wasn't the best, maybe. Yeah. I mean, we talked about, when we made a video about this earlier this week, like, Florida's defensive backs weren't like elite by the end of the season, but they were vastly improved from the last couple of seasons. So I think, Will Harris deserves credit for that. But, I think Darren Wilson has a pretty decent track record himself and is going to inherit a group with some talent to start off with, assuming that, these guys that just got here all stick around.
Yeah, it's another younger name that Billy is bringing onto his staff in Darren Wilson. I'm not sure of his age, but I mean, I just
played college football from like 2009 to 2012, so he can't be, much older than, 34, 35.
And that's why the same as Will Harris, right?
I think something like that, yeah.
So it's like they're surrounding Ron Roberts, the older guy in the room, the defensive coordinator, with a bunch of younger talent that maybe they hope can, develop a coach becoming a DC for us. Who knows how much longer Ron Roberts has on coaching in general, especially with Florida. So maybe they're trying to get someone who, they can hit on. They try to do it with, kind of did it with Patrick Toney. You got a bunch of experience around Patrick Toney. when you go look at like Sean Spencer, who was a very proven guy at Penn State, Corey Raymond from LSU, and Jay Bateman, who had also been like defensive coordinator at UNC. But Tony left after 1 year, so who knows how that would have worked out. Seemed like they tried to do it with Austin Armstrong. I guess Austin Armstrong is still a bit too soon. I think not fully ready to be a defense coordinator in the SEC. So they got Robert. And now, maybe Darren Wilson is the guy that they end up having as the next DC when Roberts leaves. Who knows? It's just that's the pattern I'm seeing right now with this coaching staff and what Billy's likes to do.
Yeah, Billy has a clear archetype he likes. Like, you're definitely right about that. It's pretty obvious. Like, really, with the exception of Corey Raymond, obviously, and then maybe Jay Bateman, like you said, had been an ACC defensive coordinator. For the most part, these names that he's hired for these positions are not super well established guys that have been in the industry for a while. Like Gerald Chapman was an analyst, had only been in the SEC at least as a interim defensive line coach, just a year or two before he got to Florida, and then went to Tulane to be the defensive line coach. So these are all guys kind of on the come up earlier in their career. And, frankly, that's a gamble. And I think it's worked out in some regards and hasn't worked out in others. Obviously brought Tony along. That didn't exactly work out. He left. Austin Armstrong, like you said, that didn't exactly work out. So, that is kind of the concern here, but I do think, Darren Wilson coming in, having 2 years of SEC experience coaching the position is maybe separates him from some of those guys in that regard.
I will say, Will Harris did probably have a bit more, not SEC experience, but he had produced a lot of guys from Washington. So, from a proven standpoint, Darren Wilson's probably not as good of a hire as Will Harris was. As we knew, when you're getting Will Harris, maybe he wasn't the best recruiter, which he had been a pretty good recruiter here, so maybe he was. Darren Wilson, you don't know if he's going to have that development. But, I assume with a younger guy like Wilson, you're probably going to get a good recruiter, someone who's familiar with the area, McNeese in Louisiana, then with Florida, Arkansas, so he's pretty comfortable with the South. So I think that's a pretty big plus when you're adding a guy to the corner room. When Florida's a state that does produce a lot of defensive backs. There's a reason Florida and LSU used to be the DBUs until recently, when both teams have had a bunch of defensive slumps.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, I think it kind of remains to be seen how good of a recruiter he is. I think, first of all, you're a little bit limited in recruiting at Arkansas. There's only so much you can do. You're in the SEC and at, a school that has fairly limited resources compared to the SEC, compared to some of the other teams in the SEC. But yeah, it worked out with Will Harris, from the recruiting angle, like you said. So yeah, I'm not necessarily blown away by this hire. It's not like he went and poached, the defensive backs coach for, some highly successful defense that was a CFP contender last year. But that's just not really again, aside from Corey Raymond, which did not work out for whatever reason, that hasn't really been Billy's MO. So I'm not really surprised to see this kind of hire here. Most of the names we had kind of heard associated with this were sort of similar guys. I think this is probably, of the names that I had heard for this position, probably at least one of the more intriguing names, though, in terms of being, a young guy, but promising and has had a decent amount of success early in his career.
Yeah, I'm not going to complain about the hire because it's way too soon. I will say there were other names around, like Doug Belk was someone that I had started hearing earlier this morning, which was a name that we both know Florida was targeting back when Billy first was hired here at UF. Billy obviously brought Patrick Toney instead with him from Louisiana, and Doug Belk went to Houston. It failed there, but how much is that on him? How much is on Houston now going from the American to the Big 12? Then went to USC, and they had a lot of defensive improvement this year, part of him. And he has 2 top 100 recruits committed to USC in the 2026 class. So I think Belk probably would have been the more splash hire than Darren Wilson would have been. But, it's also a guy who has a job at USC, and you're trying to get him for the same job. And, it's a pretty tough thing to do. So I'm going to wait and see with this hire. We'll see if we have any players end up moving in the portal, and we'll see how we can recruit. We saw Vinny Sensory come in. He's already getting guys, Braylon Womack, to now be at the top of their board. So maybe Wilson will have some connections with some guys from this 26 class from his time recruiting those guys at Arkansas. Do you have any final thoughts on the Darren Wilson hire?
No, I mean, I just think we need to wait and see. And like, I mean, just the fact of the matter is, like, even if you're, entirely believe in Billy and think that he's going to work it out and they're going to, continue to get right back on track this season. Like, the fact of the matter is, you're going to have a hard time poaching guys from big time jobs when there's uncertainty whether this coaching staff's going to remain in place beyond this season. Like, I think that's just kind of the fact of the matter. Not like things are looking great at USC either, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, this is kind of, until Billy proves it a little bit more, I think this is kind of the caliber of candidate you're going to have to be looking at. But I think this is a pretty solid one. So, I mean, I don't have any like issues with the hire. It seems fine. I'm willing to see how it works out.
Yeah, I think what I was saying about trying to get that next guy up from Ron Roberts to develop, Doug Belk probably would have been that guy, having former Power 5 DC experience.
Yeah.
Man, we just got straight into it. Right as we went live, we saw the comment from our guy Jackson Johnson at the Alabama page. Saw his comment. That's not how I expected to start this show. I was going to start talking about basketball because, man, what a week for the Gators. I mean, what is that right there? Shorthanded. We made our reactions to the Auburn game last week. There's only been one game since then. But, man, they just keep doing it. They go to Mississippi State. We did the review for Mississippi State, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we already got that done. But you lose Alex Condon in that game. And it does seem like it's going to be pretty tough, especially when you play a team like South Carolina that's going to have a lot of bigs. I mean, Conroy Boyles and Nick Pringle. Nick Pringle was a starter, or I think he was a starter for Alabama last year. And then you also have Conroy Boyles, a guy who's rejected top 18 pick on ESPN. So that's the game that you look at. It's like, you only have two bigs because Sam Alexis was also out. But then you get the news, Micah Hanglaughton is going to end up. We don't know if he's burning a red shirt yet because there is a bill being passed of just getting 5 years to play instead of 4 years red shirts. And there still will probably be medical red shirts like in that 5 year stuff. But there seems like very confident that 5 years and just flat 5 years will get passed for college basketball. Not sure about college football, though. So don't know if Micah is burning anything or if he's just going to play and hopefully build some depth on this team and take us very far in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed with the way the Gators played, without Condon and Sam Alexis, obviously. Micah in his return, like, I think pretty clearly looked like a guy who hasn't played basketball in a year.
Especially in the first half.
Yeah, he kind of got settled into it, but I mean, I think you could tell he was, maybe like, again, guy has like a titanium rod in his leg, so I'm not trying to I'm not trying to throw shade, but I mean, he looked like a guy who, maybe isn't the most conditioned at the moment.
Yeah.
But I mean, he didn't really make a massive impact on the boards, had 3 rebounds, only had 2 points, but 5 assists. Like was pretty. Like he was, influential, facilitating things as best he could.
I'm pretty sure it was a career high in assist.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't think he had 5 assists in a game last year. So, yeah, I mean, it was a useful addition to have. He played a lot, honestly. He played probably more than I thought. 20 minutes, I think. It was probably more than what I thought he would have played. If you had asked me before the game, but
he played.
They needed the depth.
20 minutes exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely played more than I had expected. Same with Elijah Martin. Elijah Martin only played 23 minutes. I thought he would play a bit more, especially in that second half. Yeah, I guess he only played a couple in the first half. But, I mean, Martin, early in that second half, he was a big reason for the defensive success. Because early in the game, I mean, we only gave up 33 points in the first half, which is not bad at all. But, like, early on, South Carolina, they're kind of scoring. But then Martin kind of came in as well. We slowed him down a bit. I think they went on a 12-minute stretch without a field goal from like the 15 mark the 8-minute mark in the second half. So I think the 15 mark in the second. Did I say the 8 mark in the first half to the 15 mark in the second half? I don't think they got a field goal. I think they only scored from free throws. Don't get me started on the refs this game. I thought it was very interesting how they ref this game, but still. Defense, they settled down. They kind of felt lazy early on, but they settled down. We got a bunch of stops and end up picking the 21-point win against a team that just a month ago or 3 weeks ago, we only beat by 1 point on a game where we only led in the last 5 seconds. So definitely a big improvement there. What are your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I mean, I just continue to be so impressed with how many ways this team is capable of winning. Like Walter Clayton only scored 10 points in this game, and he only had 6 like pretty late into the second half, scored a couple kind of at the end. But like, I mean, like Denzel Aberdeen and Tommy Houck have, since they've entered the starting lineup the last few games, have just been incredible. Like, I mean, Houck, we've kind of seen it before. Aberdeen, we really haven't. I'm not sure where this came from, but he led the team in scoring with 22. Houck had 20. I think they're each averaging like 17 and 16 points in the games that they've started here. And I mean, these are guys that ideally, I mean, maybe we can talk about it. I'm not sure you can take Denzel Aberdeen out of the starting lineup right now. I really am not sure.
Yeah, I have some questions about this a little bit later.
Yeah.
I'll also like to point out. So yeah, Walt only had 10 points. He also did have 8 assists though.
Yeah.
I mean, he had 8 assists and 4 rebounds. So it's like 10, 8, and 4. It's kind of like early, I guess, late out of conference, like in December. It kind of felt like he was sleepwalking through a lot of games. But I don't really think he's taking them slow. I think he's just improving his game. Because he's getting those 8 assists. He's trying to become a better point guard. Which I know coming into the season, a lot of people were worried that we're not going to have a true point guard because Walter Clayton as point guard last year didn't work out that well. I mean, look at the Virginia game. He probably lost us that game against Virginia last season. So it's like a lot of questions. And I think he was taking those opportunities early in the season against some weaker competition to learn how to play that position better, experiment with things. And I think we saw it again last night. 8 assists to 2 turnovers. That's a pretty good ratio right there. And I think he's still top 10 in the Ken Palm MVPs or player of the year race. So I'm not really too worried about that. At all.
Yeah, I guess what I was more getting at by talking about him only scoring 10 points was like, you wouldn't think that just looking at the score that Florida wins by 21, you wouldn't think that happens in a game where Walter Clayton only scores 10, Will Richard only scores 8, Elijah Martin only scores 11. Like this, you know what I mean? Like even when those guys don't have the most productive offensive night, you have guys like Denzel Aberdeen and Thomas Houck that can just take over and you can win games easily. Even when you're missing two big men and you have a normally starting guard coming off the bench because he's returning from injury, like when this team is back to full strength with Condon, hopefully in the next week or two, I mean, they're really rounding into form in a way that, like, I don't want to get hyperbolic. Like anything can happen in March. I'm not saying they're going to win the national championship, but like they're more and more looking like a team that I really don't know how you're going to beat them.
I mean, yeah, the same. I mean, yeah, exactly. This team is getting deeper as the year goes along. This is critical for a tournament run. I mean, my question, because you want to talk about, you can't really take Denzel Aberdeen out the starting lineup. Over the past 4 games, so since the Vanderbilt game, Vanderbilt, Auburn, Mississippi State, and South Carolina, who's been the best player on this team? I mean, you have Alex Condon, who in those 2 games, he had 19 and 17, nearly a double-double against Vanderbilt, I believe. He had a double-double against Auburn. Also played really good defense in those 2 games, especially against Auburn on the best or second best player in the country, in Janai Broome. Didn't play these past 2 games. Then you also have Walter Clayton Jr., who is the leader and probably the best player on this team. He's slower in this game against South Carolina, but you can't put away the fact that he had, 19 against Auburn, 10 in this game, and also 19 against Mississippi State, and I think he had 22 against Vanderbilt. And then you also have Denzel Aberdeen, who through these past 4 games, averaging 16 and a half points a game. Wow. I mean, he's also a playmaker, really good defender, has that good length. And then you just have Thomas Houck. I'm not sure his stats, they're not crazy. He's not averaging 16 points a game, probably around 12.
I think he is. I think he literally, at least in these games that he started, these last 2 games. Or I guess
Uh,
the last two, not that because he didn't start the Mississippi State game, but like the
yeah,
last two games that he's played starting minutes. I think he
his
literally
past.
is.
So Vanderbilt 8, Auburn 16, Mississippi State 16, and South Carolina 20.
Yeah, so he's averaging 18 in the two games that he's playing like starter minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that's just unreal. Along with the fact that he's had 9, 9, 9, and 6 rebounds these past 4 games, and 4, 3, 8, and 3 assists, and 4, 6, 7 blocks in those games, as well as 6 steals in those 4 games. I mean, earlier, or I was talking about it, who's the sixth man of the year in the SEC? Because you have like Jamie Johnson and Todd Pettiford for Auburn, who Pettiford's probably winning the award right now because he's been like that elite all season. But then you look at Florida, they have Thomas Houck and Denzel Aberdeen, who would probably start for any other team in the country besides like Auburn. I mean, because the only other option really was like Caleb Grill from Missouri, who's kind of slowed down. I'm not going to say he's slowed down, still doing really good.
Mm-hmm.
Missouri's still a really good team. But it does feel like, I mean, Thomas Houck and Denzel Aberdeen, you can't take them off the court. They're just doing too much for this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think Houck you can, because I think Condon and Shinyulu is still.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could. I mean,
you.
if you really wanted to, you could go 3 bigs with Houck.
Yep.
That's a very different style than the way this team's been playing this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Aberdeen, yeah, like, I mean, because my only thing with Aberdeen is that I don't think he's necessarily the best, like, outside shooter, but he's been knocking those shots down. Like, hasn't been consistently doing it all season, but has been the last few games. And I mean, he's a very good defender. He's good at attacking the rim. Like, if he's hitting those shots, I think you might have to have Will Richard come off the bench, who I love. Will Richard. I think Will Richard's a really fun player. And when he's on, there's not many better players in the country, but I don't know if he brings you quite as much value as Aberdeen is, at least with the way Aberdeen's playing right at this exact moment in time. Because I don't think you can bench Elijah Martin, because Elijah Martin's too good of a defender.
I think Elijah Martin or Will Richard kind of works really well with Elijah Martin in the fact that you put Elijah Martin on their ball handler, their best guard, really. And then you have Will Richard on that like second best guy. And he's getting a lot of steals when they make lazy passes or because they're really well defended. But going back to Aberdeen being a really good shooter, I mean, going to that Vanderbilt game, 1, 3, 6, 11 threes in these past 4 games, 5 of 7 against South Carolina. I saw a stat earlier that Denzel Aberdeen is shooting 56% from 3 from the corner. I think he hit one or two against Auburn, 1 against Auburn. And then I know he had 2 against Mississippi State and like 3 against South Carolina. So it's like, I mean, you can see the confidence building on Denzel Aberdeen and Thomas Houck. And I mean, Thomas Houck as well, 3 of 6 from 3 the past 2 games. I mean, both of these guys, if they're hitting threes, this team is going to be, dare I say, unstoppable. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think when they, when they do what they did last night and shoot 60% from the field and they did win the rebounding battle, which I don't think they did the first time. They didn't, right?
I think we won it by like 1.
Oh, okay, so it was tight. So yeah, I mean, when they win the rebounding battle and shoot 60% without, maybe their best big man and another, depth piece and Elijah Martin coming off the bench, like, yeah, I mean, certainly when you give a defensive performance the way that like Tennessee did in Knoxville, you can disrupt that, and they're not going to be hitting shots the way they did against South Carolina, but like when they are, yeah, I mean, we've only seen one team do it. I guess 2. I guess Kentucky and Missouri both kind of did it, but I mean, Kentucky really had to do it because they scored 106 points. Like, I don't know. Like, I think Florida has to really shoot itself in the foot to be in a disadvantaged position in any game.
I think it's about time we start talking about Florida as the best team in the country. I mean, Auburn, resume-wise, it's easily Auburn. Like, I'm not going to say we have a better resume than Auburn and we should be a seed or we should be the number 1 overall seed. But when you look at teams on the court, who you're picking to win each game, Florida's now up to 3rd in national championship odds behind Auburn and Duke. We went to Auburn and we dominated them for the last 30 minutes of that game, really. And I mean, We dominated Mississippi State in the second half, went and dominated South Carolina in the second half, and we're doing those two without maybe your second best player in Alex Condon. And then you're also losing third best players. Your second and third best players in Elijah Martin and Alex Condon. And then you're doing it with a player who hasn't played in nearly a year, and Micah Hanglotten. I mean, I'm starting to think this is the best team in the country. And the goal of this team is winning a national title, not just making the second weekend, not just making the Final Four, but winning the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, they need to be healthy to do it. Like, they need to get Condon back and have him be at full strength. But I think, at full strength, I think this team is fully capable of doing that. I mean, I think my only hang up with, calling us the best team in the country is like, I think that Auburn, I think that was a uncharacteristically poor performance from Auburn in that game. I don't know if that's because that might just be what Florida does to you. I don't know. Maybe that's the case. But I do think that, the Auburn that came out, I don't know if you watched that Alabama game yesterday, but they looked pretty impressive in that game on the road. So, Florida has the best win in the country for sure over them.
Yeah.
Auburn's probably been a little bit more consistently good, but right at this exact moment in time, I think there's an argument to be made.
Oh, I think we're starting to see some things to Auburn. I don't know if I think they're individually great as players, because you're going to go out and see Tahad Pettiford and Miles Kelly and Denver Jones go and create these step back threes that really early on in the game, when Auburn went out to a 10-point lead, Florida wasn't playing bad. Auburn was just playing insanely elite. Mm-hmm. But I think you're seeing that they kind of worry too much about self-creation rather than team creation, which is what I think we saw from Florida early in the year, which we're now the ball movement. We've mentioned the assist over the past 4 or 5 games now have been jumping up a ton. And I don't know if we're seeing that from Auburn. I mean, look at the game we had against them. They had 16 assists to our 22 assists. I'm not sure what their assist numbers were against Alabama. And then it's also I think I talked about this on our last show, that our video after the Mississippi State game, Alex Condon might be the second best big in the SEC. Has Janai Broome faced someone as good as Alex Condon until then, where you take away Auburn's best player, and then you just have the other guys kind of getting out of sorts. You have a team that can get very personal, with Chad Baker-Mazara, Janai Broome, older veteran players, and they've had a lot of things go their way, especially this year. And when things don't start going their way, it's even for a veteran group, kind of get out of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think that is a concern for them. I think we'll just have to see, I think I just want to see Florida continue to do it in this next few stretch of games, because I think they're all games that Florida should win pretty easily with or without Alex Condon, with the exception of the Texas A&M game, which I'm not sure. Texas A&M and Alabama are really the only 2 games left on the schedule that you look at and say, okay, this could be dangerous. Otherwise, I think Florida's going to be favored and pretty heavily in pretty much every game down the stretch. So Ken Palm has his favor in every game but at Alabama. Yeah. And at Alabama, we're only 1-point underdogs. Mm-hmm. I really think this team matches up too well with everybody. I don't know because I trust our defense. I'm starting to trust our defense a lot now, especially in these big games, to come out 100%. I honestly think Ole Miss could be a scary game. Ole Miss did just lose by double digits to Mississippi State, and it is a home game. But if there's a way we win out until that Ole Miss game, and if we do that, we're gonna be a lock for a 1 seed, and maybe the 1 seed, or we're fighting for a 1 seed in the SEC tournament. Even I don't know if Auburn's gonna lose. That's the only thing there. But if we beat Bama, we'll probably be the 2 seed in the SEC at least. So there might be a chance to go into that game against Ole Miss, maybe a little lackadaisical, and fumble some opportunities. Ole Miss gets out to an early start, kind of like how Missouri did, where they went up 19 points in that first half, and maybe we come up close. Maybe we do find a way to win it. Maybe they aren't. Maybe they're fully locked in for every game of this season, looking to win a championship. Yeah, no, for sure. Not a ton to add from that. I mean, I think this team is really rounding into form. And I'm excited to see when Condon gets back, hopefully for that Alabama game. We'll just
Even A&M,
what was that?
even Texas A&M, Micah Handlaughton, when he came back, he said that he expects Condon to be back in 1 to 2 weeks, which that 2 weeks maximum would be right before that A&M game.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, that would be huge if he's back by then. I mean, I think it's pretty clear this team can win without him.
Yeah.
But I think this team, when it has all its guys, just looks like an absolute wagon right now.
I think the thing with A&M that makes them different, though, like they're different from like every other SEC team in the fact that they're not really trying to play offense too much. Like they're going to play defense and offensive rebounds. I think they lead the nation in offensive rebounds, which if we don't have Alex Condon, could get a little worrisome in that game. Could. Because we've seen us rebound pretty well even without him. So that's kind of why I think if we have Alex Condon hosting Texas A&M, I'm going to feel pretty confident, like as confident as you can feel for a team that was the 6th ranked team in the NCAA committee's top 16 protected seeds where they released yesterday, where they have Florida 4. But without him, I think it's probably going to be a very close, tough dial game.
Yeah, no, for sure.
All right. We're going to send you guys to a little sponsor video. Be 30 seconds. We'll be back.
Ohio State, Michigan, the greatest rivalry in sports deserves the greatest debate in sports. Monday, February 17th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the main channel. It's the Ohio State, Michigan All Everything Debate with me, taking your calls all night if it takes all night. I'm pulling no punches, so beware. Bring your best intel. It's the Ohio State, Michigan All Everything Debate. It will be epic. February 17th, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Be there.
You heard Mark Rogers, Ohio State, Michigan, the game, maybe the biggest rivalry in all of sports, especially with like how the upsets have been with Michigan. Well, this past year, Michigan kind of dominating, and then Ohio State winning the national championship still. I mean, that's a pretty fun debate idea. But the Gators, the college baseball season had just started. And man, I know we played Air Force. They won the Mountain West last season, so they're not a whole bad team, but they're probably, I don't know how they are this year. I mean, is this our baseball team? Is it the best in the country?
I mean, you can't say that from the opening, from just that series, but they looked really solid.
They looked
even in ways that I wasn't necessarily expecting them to be.
Absolutely. My biggest, the pitching. Pitching was probably a lot better. Or, it's Air Force, but we saw us lose games like this last year. Our opening series, I think we lost 2 games last year, right?
It was so the opening series was just 1 game because Florida lost to St. John's, and then the rest of the series got rained out. So they lost the only game in the opening series. It was a really bad night from Cade Fisher, who is now the Friday night guy at Auburn. Actually, he started the other night for them. But yeah, I mean, the pitching this weekend was really, really good. I mean, Liam Peterson, who was, sort of inconsistent last year, had some moments as a true freshman that were impressive, but got a lot of responsibility and didn't necessarily always live up to it. Was really great on Friday night though. Went 6 innings, struck out 11, 2 hits, no earned runs, only 1 walk. Pierce Coppola was about that good on Sunday too. 12 strikeouts. So were you trying to say something or?
Oh, I was saying I think he was even better.
Yeah. I mean, Pierce looked great. I mean, even Clemente, who kind of had a rough start, Jake Clemente, the Saturday guy, had kind of a rough start, but it ended up being, I mean, he gave up 2 earned runs in 6 innings with 8 strikeouts. Like that's fine. Like that's more than fine. That'll play. And then the lineup looked great too. So, I mean, really not much to complain about. I mean, 1 through 9, I mean, the back half of this lineup is a lot better than it was last year. I can tell you that much.
Absolutely. How many deep can we go? We can probably go. So we have 1 through 9, and then we probably have like 4 guys who aren't going to be in the rotation that would have started last year or would have been leading, or would have been in 1 through 9 last year. I mean, but I think the MVP of it has to be Brady Donay. I mean, he was a guy last year we saw have good home run power, bit inconsistent. but we saw like especially in the College World Series last year in Omaha hit some pretty big home runs. Well, he kind of has a light 4 home runs through 3 games now, leading the country. I assume he is. He has to be leading the country with that. And like these were bombs. Like I saw he had a 431. I mean, a 430. So it's like going into the year, I knew we had a really good like 1 through 9, but I didn't know if we had that like big home run guy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we're now looking at it with Brady Donay.
Yeah, he was fantastic. And like you said, had those moments last year. Especially late in the season, like in the postseason, really came up big a few times, but looked really polished this weekend. Was it a homer in each game? Did he homer in it once in each game?
He had 1 homer game 1, 1 homer game 2, 2 homers game 3.
Oh, okay. Wait, really? I'm looking on the website. He only has 3 homers listed. Are you sure he had 2 in game 3?
I'm 90% sure.
Okay. Well, yeah, regardless, he was really, really good. Looks like, I mean, I'm not saying he's Jack Caglione, but certainly looked like the closest thing the Gators have to that on this year's roster. So I'm really impressed. Curious to see how the midweek pitching looks. That was a really big problem last year. Didn't really have the pitching depth for 3 weekend games, let alone 1 or 2 midweek games. So that really kind of burned them and was a big part of the reason that they were so close to being under 500 was the midweek losses. So very curious how that looks this time around with the young pitchers.
Okay. He did only have 1 in the 3rd game. That's because I looked at it. I thought I saw he singled to center field. Like I thought he got a single home run, but he got a single to center field and advanced to runner. He had an RBI, so that's where I got confused. But
gotcha.
Still, 3 home runs in 3 games. That's as good as it gets. That's all you can ask for from a guy.
Yeah, I thought Colby Shelton looked a lot better than he did for most of last year. Had a home run. So did Bobby Bozer.
Yep.
The Stetson is Bobby Bozer the Stetson transfer?
That sounds right.
I believe so. There's 1 from Stetson, there's 1 from Miami, Blake Sear, and then Justin Nadeau from Jacksonville. Oh no, Kyle Jones is the Stetson transfer. Where did Bobby
Bozer USF?
USF.
Right.
Okay. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, USF.
So they have 4 in-state transfers, like 4 or 5 in-state transfers from Florida who all had plate appearances over the weekend.
Yeah, Bozer last year had. Oh, that's where they don't have his home runs. Thought I'd look at the season stats, but they only have them in. Oh wait, here we go. Nope. Okay. But yeah, I mean, very impressive stuff from pitching and from the batting lineup. Makes me very excited to see how this team's going to do, and I think that ranking of 10 is maybe a bit low. And I think this is a team that I think they might be. This is probably better than last year's team, but last year's team did make like that Final Four. I don't know how. Semifinals last year. We don't really play. I don't know how good Dayton is, but we don't really play one until we host Miami February 28th to March 2nd. March 1st, same day as the Texas A&M game. Might hit that up before the A&M game.
That's a little late. Yeah, that's a little late for Miami. Usually that's at least like the second weekend, if not the first.
What I thought. Yeah, we have a pretty weak out of conference schedule this year.
And truthfully, even the conference schedule is not that bad by SEC standards. Like there's no such thing as an easy SEC baseball schedule because literally every team is like a bubble team. I mean, it's like basketball is this year, maybe even more so. So there's no easy schedule, but you got Tennessee, which is going to be tough, but then Vandy's at home, Arkansas's at home. You don't have LSU. It definitely could be worse. So
yeah, and the out of conference, all you really have is Miami and FSU, where you have 1 game at FSU and 1 game home, or 2 games home against FSU.
It's usually 1. Yeah, it's 1 in Gainesville, 1 in Tallahassee, and then 1 they play at the Jacksonville. The minor league ballpark in Jacksonville.
Yeah. The second one is in Jacksonville. Okay, and then the last one is home. Okay, and that game's on ESPN too. That's cool. They have some games already announced for ESPN too. like at Mississippi State. Yeah, at least wanted to give some quick thoughts on baseball. Nothing too. Okay, Rob. Really, with another buddy hire. I mean, we're looking at a guy that was a secondary coach in the SEC. Got some pretty high praises and developed some pretty good players at Arkansas. So, he did work for him for a year. I mean, that's that.
Yeah, but it is kind of a buddy hire, but I think it's one of the buddy hires that Billy Napier's made as the coach of the Gators, I would say.
Yeah, I think your connection is starting to fade out a bit, but we'll go on quickly. Jalen Waters decommits from the Gators. Jalen Waters decommits from the Gators. Excuse me. He's the 142nd ranked prospect on the 247 composite. 6'2", 170 out of Armwood, Sefner, same school that Desmond Watson had attended. This is it's a pretty big loss when you lose a player who is rated this highly. You never do want to lose a player who's in that top 150, especially. Probably following Will Harris to Miami, this had been something that we've not necessarily expected to happen, but it was something that was like, it could happen at really any time. And I'd guess the fact that Will Harris did leave and did go to Miami probably was like that last straw that caused Jalen Waters to end up decommitting, already getting crystal balls to end up committing to Miami. He had been committed to FSU beforehand as well. So it looked like he's going to be making the whole trip of Florida. Don't know how many guys you end up seeing committed to all three Florida schools. That's pretty cool, I guess. But it's February 16th. Signing day isn't for another 10 months. I'm not going to be worried about a kid decommitting in February. I mean, when you look at our class from 2025 in February of 2024, it's a pretty big difference. I mean, heck, even in November, the class was ranked in the 50s. And then we got it to 8th. I think it's the 8th ranked class now. In the 2025 class, ended up finishing ranked 8th. Yeah. And like right there with Auburn. Like it's one or two players short of being a top 6 level class. So there we go. I'm not going to worry about losing a player in February when you still have 10 months to recruit other players who could be ranked higher, maybe lower, and when you have a different cornerback coach coming in, maybe he doesn't like the guy, maybe he likes other players more. Maybe he has his own players to bring in.
Yeah, sorry about the network issues. Seems to be working now. But yeah, I mean, I don't think this is that big of a deal, to be honest with you.
Yep.
I mean, first of all, it's 2025. No recruit decommitting is that big of a deal because it's just the nature. I mean, we're a year out from signing day. Guys now are not even locked in when they sign because they can leave at pretty much any given time. So,
yep.
I mean, there's no reason to be too concerned about this. We saw Florida change the trajectory of its 2025 class pretty significantly in a week, 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about when you were
okay, yeah, sorry.
So that's exactly what I'm
repeating your point. But yeah, I think that a lot can change. I mean, I think you were saying we kind of thought he was maybe going to go to Miami in the first place. Will Harris leaving probably just made that, all but a formality, which he hasn't officially committed to Miami yet, has he?
No. He has crystal balls, but he has not officially.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we'll just see. Florida doesn't have a lot going on right now as far as 2026 recruits go, but as we get closer to the season, obviously that's going to ramp up a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was a kid. I'm kind of shocked that even when Will Harris was here, that was getting talks about flipping to Miami already, because during the season and during the upturn in our commitments, he was tweeting a lot, laughing at other people who were making fun of Billy Napier. So then when I started getting alerted that, hey, Miami is legitimately in this, this could happen at any moment. It could happen this weekend, could happen in 2 weeks. Like, I mean, it's a big surprise, honestly, because I mean, I don't have his tweets pulled up, but he was really pro Billy and really pro Florida. So like a kid who wanted to be here. I already mentioned he's from a school that produced some Florida talent like Desmond Watson, someone who's a 5-year or 4-year player here. So it's kind of surprising. Like him flipping now isn't, but if you would have told me 2 months ago that, oh yeah, Jalen Waters of the 3 commits in the 26th class, he's going to be flipping or decommitting, I probably would have been surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any like specific insight on this specific situation, but like I just say, like, generally speaking, you know, this is just a lot less of a relationship based business now. You know, like I'm sure he does believe in Billy and had that kind of relationship with this staff, but like at the end of the day, if Miami comes in and offers more than Florida is willing to do, because at the end of the day, it's a limited resource. Like there's only so much you can do about that. Again, I'm not saying that's what happened here, but those are the kind of things that happen a lot in recruiting now. And it's just like, you basically have 2 options. You can either, you know, match what's happening and, you know, maybe, you know, run the risks that come with that, or you just deal with it and move on to someone else. So just kind of is what it is. But yeah, a lot of time to kind of recover that momentum on the trail for 2026. Wouldn't say it's something I'm too worried. I mean, if you come out and win this year and you're a playoff contender, I think 2026 recruiting will more or less take care of itself at that point. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure Darren Wilson, he's probably already recruiting some other players to come to UF. I mean, we mentioned this earlier in the show. UF is stacked with athletic talent like DBs and receivers. So we're going to get our guys. I mean, we got Ben Hanks and Onis Conanbanny in this past class. So we already got some 4-star corners. Even somehow Ben Hanks is a 5-star, as we talked about. So I'm not too worried at this point about corner. I mean, there are a lot of DBs in this class that we have some looks at. I mean, talked about Braylon Womack and Aiden Pouncey, you know, safeties. Well, you know how those high school recruiting can be, where someone can be listed as a safety, but we can be recruiting them as a corner, and you know we can be a corner or safety, vice versa. There's all types of different way those things can go. So again, it sucks to lose a player who's in who's ranked in that top 150, but it's way too early on. You can finish as someone ranked as a low 2-star. I mean, not 2-star, 4-star. I mean, you can finish as a 5-star. Who knows?
Yeah.
Gators. You know, this has been a pretty actually busy week compared to the past 2 months since signing day really has ended. We made some GM hires, something that we had been waiting on for 2 months, I guess. Yeah, time was slow. We hired Nick Polk to be to run us as like an NFL style front office. Spent 18 years with the Atlanta Falcons, running their salary cap and signings and stuff. So I think, from an experience perspective, that is a pretty good hire. I mean, we don't really know how that's going to end up working out in college, because a bunch of differences from just having, okay, you can only spend X amount of money and that's official. And you're probably going to be somewhere like within like 20, I mean, depending on what your team's goals are, if you're trying to tank or if you're trying to win now, you're going to be spending for sure at that amount. And there's some workarounds. But with college, it's definitely a lot different. You're working with NIL deals. You're working with other companies to give you those deals. You're working with these players to figure out how much they want. You're going to try to figure out how much you can give per position. And you're not just working with players that you're trying to recruit. You're also trying to keep your current players with you. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this works out.
Yeah, it's a complex new space within the sport that everyone's sort of just kind of trying to figure out at the same time. And no one even really knows what this is all going to look like by the time we actually kick off a ball in 2025, because the house settlement that's on the table right now, the court settlement that would essentially, you know, institute rev share, you know, allow institutions to pay players directly. They're expecting some sort of resolution there in April. Like the prevailing consensus has been that it's gonna go through, but now I'm hearing like a lot of stakeholders don't think it's going to go through. Really? So there's a lot of that. Yeah, that's kind of what I've been hearing the last like week or so. I've heard some people say that. So I don't know what's going to happen, but none of them do either. They can kind of just take educated guesses. So this is all, I think, what this role looks like is to be determined. But I think the important thing that I've seen, like kind of in the way it's been reported on and publicly discussed by the school, is it seems like this is a contract heavy position. Like
Yes.
this job is about contracts. It's about managing money, salary caps, writing deals. Like this is not a GM, like an NFL GM, like going to be making talent acquisition move. Like if you were hoping they were going to bring in a GM who would like go get, top tier transfers when Billy's not willing to go after those guys. Like that's not what Nick Polk is from everything that I can
That's
tell.
a different hire.
Yeah. Well, it's a different hire that I'm not sure they've made or are going to make.
I think they have. At the same time we hired Nick Polk, we also hired Ben Elsner,
I've heard that's also a contracts thing too. We can get into that, but I've heard that's also
he's listed as football strategy, using analytics and AI to help determine how this roster outlook will be.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's a lot of just technology words that could mean anything. It could mean they're just using it to determine money. I mean, it's why hire two people. Could be they're using it to determine, okay, we need a player who's this good for this price, which, could end up helping us in the transfer portal. Maybe they realize, oh, well, this edge, Kofi Asare, like for what we're looking at on a grading scale wise, he's like I don't know, like I don't know how this works. Like, exactly, like it could be anything. That's how it could go.
Mm-hmm. And that's not even talking about what happens to Jacob LaFrance, who's already on staff, has been on staff since Billy came over from Louisiana, has the title general manager right now. Nick Polk's title is associate AD and football general manager. So you can tell me what the difference between that and general manager is. So I think there's a lot about this front office, I guess if you want to call it that, the front office structure that is still a question mark. But I think this is sort of like just a bare minimum move. Like you just got to do this. This is what teams are doing now. And this sport is becoming complex to a point that one guy who's also a head coach just literally can't do all this. So.
Yeah, I don't know how to describe this. I mean, this is a hire we've wanted. I mean, we didn't have this position before, so I assume it's going to help us. But it's also like, we're just assuming here. Maybe it does help us distribute money. Maybe he's going to help get more money from boosters. I mean, we talked about Solomon Thomas. It seemed like he was just straight up going to whatever school offered him more money between us and LSU. Maybe if we had Polk on staff, maybe we would have offered him the more money. Maybe they would have realized, oh, we do have this little bit that's not going anywhere else. Or decided that instead of paying him, we paying Dice. So we find out better value at Thomas. I mean, again, it's a lot of Billy doing what he does a lot, where it's just, he does a lot, but he also does nothing, it feels. Like he makes all these hires, but no one really knows what they do. So,
yeah. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Yeah, I mean, the way I look at this is like, to me, this isn't something that's going to give Florida like a competitive edge. I'm not saying like it doesn't mean it's a bad hire. Like I don't think it's a bad move. I think he seems qualified. This is something that Florida has to do just to stay competitive, because this is what all the top tier programs in college, and not even top tier. I mean, look at the structure that North Carolina is implementing. And they're not alone. Like just because it's not just a Belichick thing. Like this is the way the sport is moving, and you're not going to be competitive with the top tier of the sport unless you do something like this. So again, this isn't going to give Florida an edge because this is something that everyone's doing right now, but needed to be done nonetheless. So glad it's happening.
Yeah, all this stuff is just so confusing. I'm ready to move on from it. I think it's time to get to what we're really here to do. Let's get to some on the field stuff. We're going to be talking about, we're going to be breaking down. There we go. We're going to be breaking down the position groups on the offense, going through the quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, receivers, offensive line. We're going to be breaking down, I think we're going to give them a grade as well heading into spring. we're heading in the spring, so we don't really know exactly who's going to be starting. There's obviously going to be another portal that opens up, so you can add, you can subtract. So I think we're just going to start off. Well, we're going to start off in a pretty easy spot, the quarterback position. I mean, you obviously have the leader in DJ Lagway, the guy that you're really building everything around here. If you don't have DJ Lagway, you're probably not the coach here at Florida. Now, if you're going to say like, oh, well, that's bad, it's around one player, but it's also like his on the field play is man, I don't know how to even. I don't know, man. I don't even know the word I was going to say, but Lagway kind of is Florida at this point, because I think we do have good players on defense and around him on offense. But you look at the national media when they talk about Florida, oh, they're not talking about Caleb Banks and Tyreek Sapp. They're not talking about Jake Slaughter. It's like, oh, well, can DJ Lagway lead Florida to the playoffs, to a national championship? So it's like Lagway just is the guy here, and we got to hope that he is the guy that we want him to be.
Yeah, well, there's one thing that changed the second half of last season when Florida started winning big games, and it wasn't the starting center. It wasn't, the defensive line personnel.
I think it was.
Well, but what I'm saying is those pieces were all there. It was Lagway that sort of made it all work down the stretch. I mean, do you not agree with that?
I think Lagway was a part of it, but like you go look at the Tennessee game, Mertz has us up 10-0, then Mertz gets hurt. Lagway throws an interception on that first play after Mertz gets hurt, then Tennessee ties it. I mean, do you think if Mertz stays in that game that we win that? I mean, Mertz probably doesn't throw that interception.
Honestly, no, because we still had interception aside, Lagway also, threw the touchdown that tied it at the end. So, and also there was the mismanagement at the end of the first half. Like there were a lot of factors that went in. I guess the point I'm more trying to make is the ceiling for the offense increased tremendously when DJ came in. And I mean, I think it had an intangible effect on every aspect of the team, because again, it's not like we changed anything significant personnel wise in the defense that made it go from horrifically bad to good, if not very good, down the stretch of the season.
I mean, you say Mertz had us up 10-0. We should have been up 24-0. I mean, even when Lagway was on the field in that first half, some bad play calling, or I mean, if a play doesn't work, people are going to call it bad play calling. Like the 4th and short with Lagway, and we do the sweep to Trey Wilson. Bad play calling, you can call it bad, you can call it not bad. I don't really care. I mean, the team was the team, and I mean, even you go back to the UCF game, that first game after the bye week, the offense was very fluid with Mertz on the field. Like we weren't really hitting big plays, but I mean, looking against Tennessee, Mertz was driving down the field a lot. Like every single drive, they were driving down the field. Now, we only had 10 points, and 3 of those, I think, were with Lagway on the field. Or, no, sorry, it was with Mertz on the field. But, I mean, the offense was moving. The defense was playing lights out. I mean, they had Tennessee shut out in that first half. I mean, held UCF to 13. But I still think the defense got better during that bye week. I mean, we've talked about it a lot, how there was just that fundamental change during that bye week between weeks 4 and week 6. So it's like the defense still improved. And I mean, I think we beat Tennessee if Mertz doesn't get hurt. I do think we would lose to Ole Miss. And I think LSU would be 50-50 if Mertz still didn't get hurt. I think Lagway did improve the team, but I don't think the difference in this team being top 15, top 20, however you want to rank us as a team, not record wise, but actually as a team, to top 25 with Mertz versus with Lagway.
I mean, maybe, but we were not a top 25 team until Lagway came in.
I mean, yeah, of course, we didn't win the games until Lagway came in, but
yeah,
I feel like if you just want to look at results alone, like the win and loss, you can. I mean, that's obviously what matters. But I feel like there are other extenuating circumstances you do have to look at that could change things, just a simple coin flip.
No, I mean that's absolutely true. And we're veering off the topic at hand here.
We are.
But no, I mean I think like looking at the quarterback room going into 2025, I mean it's hard not to feel good about it because like you said, Lagway is everything. Like Lagway is the Billy Napier tenure at this point. If Lagway works out, Billy's probably going to work out at least until Lagway moves on.
Yep.
And if Lagway doesn't work out for whatever reason, it's pretty much impossible for me to foresee a scenario where Lagway is considered a disappointment in 2025 and Billy Napier is still the coach going into 2026. Like, don't really see how that's possible.
Yeah, I 100% agree there. I mean, so we look deeper down into this depth chart at the QB position. You do have Harrison Bailey, guy, ton of experience, started out at Tennessee, went to UNLV, then Louisville, now at UF. I think when you're going into the transfer portal to get a backup, probably the best we could have done. I mean, obviously we had Deshaun Purdy, who I probably would have said higher ceiling than Bailey. Don't know if the floor, how low the floor really was with Deshaun Purdy. Probably would have liked him for his mobility. But I think you're getting Harrison Bailey. You're getting a guy that's going to be fine. He's a backup. Like, you're hoping you don't have to play him. And if you do, it's in the end of the game. Or maybe Lagway just has to sit out a drive. I mean, I think it's a fine guy. Then you also have Tramell Jones. I suspect Tramell Jones will be the third string. I mean, you hope you don't have to go to Tramell Jones at any point, so we can take a red shirt. But I think if we got in a situation like we did this past year, where Mertz and Lagway got hurt, I think Jones would be in instead of the fourth string, Aiden Warner.
I think you're right if it were like, God forbid, both suffering like season-ending injuries. I think if Bailey has to start a game and loses his helmet, I think it'll be Aiden Warner.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to say. If it's a moment where we're having to start multiple games, it would be Tramell. Yeah. But if it's just like a couple plays, couple drives, probably Aiden Warner.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's hard not to feel better about the quarterback room than you did last year.
Definitely.
I mean, the drop back. I mean, at least the quarterback room post Graham Mertz injury, because I mean, as you saw, an injury to DJ's hamstring, and you're playing a walk-on former Yale backup, and that went about as well as you would expect that it would.
Yeah.
So, I don't think Harrison Bailey is like fantastic. I think if we're at the point where he's having to start 4 or 5 games, I think you can wrap it up and go home. But I think he's a guy that if you had to come out and start a single game, I think it'd be better than what you saw against Texas this past year. Also, Clay Millen is still here, I guess, right? I mean, he's still. I haven't seen anything that he's leaving. I think he's on the roster still. I don't know what his situation is. That whole thing has been very bizarre.
Maybe he's getting a degree here at UF, finishing something here at UF. That's, if I had to guess, that's what I would say.
Yeah.
I'm not going to expect him to play because we didn't see him at all, even in big situations this past year. So, yeah. Overall, I'm going to give the QB room an A.
Yeah.
Just because you have DJ Lagway and you have a good backup in Harrison Bailey. If we would have had a guy that we recruited out of high school, if we had Jaden Rashada, somehow he was here, Austin Simmons, if he was the backup, I'd probably give it an A+. But we have missed on some recruits, so now we're having to go and get a okay transfer QB to be the backup. But it would be an A+, but I'm gonna go with A.
Yeah, I was kind of between an A and an A and an A- here. I think I'll go with A just because I don't think on paper it's the best quarterback room top to bottom by any means, but I just have that much belief in DJ Lagway, and I think the rest of it's good enough. Harrison Bailey, a guy that started multiple Power 5 games. Tramell Jones, not an elite recruit, but a high level recruit, true freshman. I think. And then obviously a guy that we expect, maybe not a Heisman contender, just because I don't know if he'll produce like that in Billy's offense, but one of the better quarterbacks in college football.
I mean, you just got to think you can't lose your starting QB 3 years in a row. I mean,
One would think, but I think you'd also be hard pressed to find an institution that's had as bad quarterback luck in the last decade or so
yeah.
as the University of Florida.
All right. Okay, but let's go to the running back room now. So I think we have some interesting discussions after Jaden Ball. I think it's pretty safe to say Jaden Ball will be the starting running back. I mean, they sometimes run out a different running back for the first drive. I mean, we saw a little bit this past year where I think Jacoby Jackson started like the Texas game where he was on the first drive, but I think it was split, but like Ball was listed as a starter. So I'm going to assume Jaden Ball starts, had his freshman season. A lot of people saw it in the spring game where it's like, okay, this kid is someone you have to get on the field. It does take a Montreal Johnson injury to really see Jaden Ball get a lot of touches. But when he got those touches, started his first career game against Kentucky and got 5 touchdowns and 100 yards. And then he just kept continuing it. Good games against Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss. Like, he had good games the rest of the season. And as a freshman running back, you assume you're going to continue developing him. We've seen it a lot with Jabbar Jalou, developing guys like Montreal Johnson and Trevor Etienne. So, and Jacoby Jackson even we're seeing developed. So I'm going to assume it's safe to say Ball is the starter. And what are your thoughts on Jan Ball?
I mean, yeah, I think Ball is really promising. Was I think, like I said, DJ was a big part of the main reason the offense emerged. I still believe that, but I don't want to take credit away from Bob because I think he was a big part of that too. Nothing again. Like, I mean, Montreal was really good for the Gators. I think Bob maybe at least at his best last year was even better than what we've seen from Montreal, or at least looked like he has the potential to be better.
That's fair.
So,
I mean, I'll say Montreal. I'll say Montreal. Like the Tennessee game, Ball, like none of the other running backs to get going against Tennessee, but Montreal was kind of cooking Tennessee. Like I think that injury in that Tennessee game is also underappreciated, like for how big of an impact it did have. Because I think Montreal had like 80 yards or 60, 80 yards or something, like 5 yards a carry, while the other running backs I think finished in the 20s.
Yeah,
it's like 2 yards a carry. So
yeah,
I do think people underrate Montreal a bit.
That's probably fair. And he was a really good player for the Gators, so I'm not trying to do that. But no, but I really like the ceiling with Ball. I think, you have the potential to have one of the best rushing offenses in the country next year with the guys you bring back at running back and obviously the starters coming back along the offensive line, which we'll get to. But I think it's, potential for a really good running game, especially because when you look at like the experience, in this room, Jacoby Jackson, obviously we talked about a little bit, a guy that, with Montreal's injury, kind of got that RB2 workload most of the time and, impressed with it. I think Treyon Webb and KD Daniels are both guys that have had their moments at times. We'll see which one of them kind of emerges as the next guy up. I'll be honest, I'm not sure I necessarily believe that both of them will still be here by fall.
That's where I think things get interesting. I don't think Jacoby Jackson has the second string running back like spot secured.
Okay.
Because we saw, early in the season when Webb was healthy, he was the second string running back to Montreal Johnson. So I think that's something they're still going to look at. That's where I think things get interesting with Jacoby Jackson, Treyon Webb, and KD Daniels. I think you're going to see one of them transfer in the spring, but I'm not going to say that with 100% confidence. But like I do really like Jacoby Jackson. I think we saw a lot of good from him last year. I think with the emergence of Ball, Jacoby kind of got a little bit underappreciated too. Like, because he had some really good plays. Georgia game, he's the one who tied it up with 5 minutes left, where he had a really good drive there. But that's something I don't know if we would have got from Ball or Montreal or any of the other running backs on this in this RB room. So I was really impressed with Jacoby Jackson on the season. And then Webb. Webb is kind of just okay. Like, from what we saw from him. Like, that's the guy I expect to transfer. I expected him to transfer after the season, but now he's returning. Maybe things change here in this spring practice cycle. Maybe they don't. That's kind of where I'm a bit shook.
Yeah, I think, you're right that there's just a lot of different ways kind of this carry distribution could shake out. I think though, I would agree. I expect one of them to hit the portal, and I think that'll kind of I think whoever hits the portal will kind of give you a pretty clear picture of how that battle went down.
Yeah. We also have some freshmen in this room. You know, we bring in Byron Lewis, from St. Thomas Aquinas, right?
That sounds right.
Yeah, I think it's from St. Thomas Aquinas. Led that team to like 1,700 rushing yards, led them to a state championship. He's someone I really like. I don't know. He's not
American Heritage. Sorry.
American Heritage. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I got confused there. But yeah, I mean, someone I really like for the future. Didn't really see much of him this year. Waltez Clark, another 4-star, also out of Plant from Tampa. A guy, again, probably not going to see too much of him. And Chad Gasper, you know, I think he's a walk-on or a preferred walk-on. But that isn't confirmed. I guess we'll see in the come spring. I mean, yeah, come spring. I'm also going to give the running back room an A. Man, it's tough. Because do I think Jaden Ball is going to be the... Well, I mean, if we're talking about the whole room, the thing with Billy's offense is he splits the carries. Like, you're probably not going to see one guy go for 1,000 yards. But, I mean, we saw it with the first 2 years here where you're going to have Montreal and Etienne go for like 800 yards. And then you have some other guys go for like 300. So is that enough for like an A+? Because I expect the yards are going to be there.
I'll say I'm an A+. I'm an A+.
You're an A+?
I'm an A+ on the running back room. I think, I mean, maybe there's not like the completely proven guy the way that like Montreal was coming into last season, but I think there's an insane amount of talent here. I think it's talented enough to weather an injury or two. And that's to me the mark. And like, we know Billy's going to have a productive rushing offense. Like that's the one thing he's really good at. Like, and I mean, I have my criticisms of Billy, but I'll never take that away from him. The man can design a run game, design and implement a run game.
Yeah, I'm going to go with an A. But I mean, it could be A+, you know, it's I'm probably gonna have some higher grades than you later on. So, you know, I'll even things up a bit. So true. I'm gonna give it an A. Yeah. Let's get to maybe definitely a weaker position here with the tight end room. Outside of one guy, I don't know who's gonna start. So Hayden Hansen started last year. He's the guy that I'm pretty confident is gonna be starting at one of those 2 tight end spots as that main blocker, decent pass catcher, nothing special. I mean, he's solid hands, you know, can get open from time to time. Not going to expect too much from him. The next tight end spot, I'm really between like 2 guys here. Tony Livingston saw some good production from at the end of the season, but we've also seen that with like Arlis Boardingham 2 years ago, I guess you would say, 2 seasons ago, where it's like, you know, middle to end of the season, he got more production, and then we didn't see it at all this year. And the name that I think is more exciting, Amir Jackson, you know, I think he was like the 99th ranked recruit in that 2024 class. High upside tight end in that receiving game. We haven't seen Billy have good production from his tight ends in his years here. Is it because they haven't had that guy who can go and get those yards and make those plays, or is it the offense? I think if Amir Jackson is a player that we see it from, we will know if it's the offense or if it's the players.
Yeah, it's really bizarre to me that the tight end has been such an issue position for the Gators under Billy because they run so much 12 personnel. Like, it's weird to me that tight end recruiting and development hasn't been a bigger emphasis for Billy than it has been. And I mean, because like I said, we have 2 tight ends on the field a lot of the time, so you kind of know what role Hayden Hansen's going to play. It's the same role he's been playing. I would expect Tony Livingston is kind of the guy that at least starts off in that sort of Arlis role. Hopefully he can be more productive in it than Arlis was. You know, we'll see about Amir Jackson. Like, I don't love this room though. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I'm a little surprised they didn't take a transfer here. I kind of expected them to.
I think there's something we gotta also talk about. So I said I'm confident in Hayden Hansen starts, which I am. There was like, I don't think he was as good as a run blocker as you'd have liked from this past year. People forget too, the last transfer cycle we took Caleb Rios from Air Force, he had to sit a year because different transfer portal rules with the armed services academies. So I think he's someone that, coming from that option system, is going to be a good run blocker.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if we do see Rios in his one season here push Hayden Hansen. I don't know too much about him. I didn't go back and watch any of his stuff. Maybe he's just here because, he's going to focus on education, and UF's a great school. I've heard some decent things about him, and so I'm going to say that could be someone we see become a really good tight end blocker for us.
You're talking about Rios, right?
Rios, yeah.
Yeah, so he's a walk-on.
Okay.
Not my concern here, because 11 starts at 2023 at Air Force. So I mean,
okay, so
certainly not like a guy who's green. Kind of my issue here is it looks like 10 career catches in 3 years or 4 years at Air Force from him.
That's where I was getting
eight catches for 97 yards in his one season as the starter. So
that's where I was getting on like the run blocker. Like, we're not going to see him catch much, which, I mean, again, with how bad the tight end room is, if we had a really good run blocker, at least you had something, which we didn't really have this year.
Yeah.
So
I guess that just doesn't elevate the position group, though, because Hayden Hansen's already pretty good at that. So, like, what we really need is, like, I mean, obviously you're not going to get Kyle Pitts, but like someone that can actually stretch the field and be a factor in the receiving game. We thought, I mean, I'm surprised it didn't work out with our list, because I thought the flashes he showed early on were pretty promising, but clearly didn't work out.
Yeah, a lot of this tight end room is really going to be judged on if Livingston or Amir Jackson can break out. I do think the ceiling is a lot higher with Amir Jackson, but we'll see if it ends up playing out. I'm gonna give this room a C+, and that's probably being generous.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a flat C for me.
Flat C, okay.
And even that I think you could easily make a case for C- here, considering the only even really proven player in the group is a guy who doesn't really produce on the stat sheet. It is kind of just good at a role. So
yeah, my grading was really just like a lot of veteran players. You're not counting on someone young. You're not being like, okay, this guy's going to go out there. He might be a bad run blocker. He might not even be able to catch the ball. So, at least we have something there. All right. Do you want to do offensive tackle or wide receiver next?
Let's change it up. Let's do offensive tackle.
Offensive tackle. Okay. So left tackle, I assume left tackle. One of the tackles is going to be Austin Barber. That's 100% locked in. Austin Barber will be starting. I've even seen mock drafts have him as a projected first-round pick. I don't think that happens, but it just shows how good of a guy he can be for us. Whether that's at left or right tackle, I'm going to say left tackle, because based on what we've seen from Billy, is probably going to be left tackle. But that other starting job is where it gets interesting. After the bowl game, the name we heard a lot about, not just from him impressing in the bowl game, but also end-of-the-year practices, was Fletcher Westphal. I'm going to say that's the guy who starts the other tackle position unless we get another guy in the transfer portal during that spring window. That's the one question I have. I think we do have some other more experienced guys like Cam Waits. I don't want him starting at tackle based on what we saw in that Miami game alone. There is still Devin Manuel who's on the team.
Yeah.
He missed a lot of the season with the injury. When we saw from him when he was getting a third of the snaps early on with splitting with Barber was just a lot of meh, nothing too good. But maybe it was just him being in a new school, and then he didn't have the chance to get used to things because he got injured. Because he did have some decent grades at Arkansas, so it's not like he's just some horrible guy who's never done anything. It's he's just some decent stuff in the SEC. So I'm not going to 100% count him out. Another game I'm looking at was Caden Jones to start. Has another year than Westphal does here at UF. So he does have that edge on Westphal. And I did hear some good things coming into the season. We didn't really see him at all this year. But I've heard some good things going into the season. So that's kind of where I still have maybe a little inclination that he could do something.
Yeah, Barber, I think you got to feel pretty good about Barber the way he ended last season. I think let me put it this way: did Crenshaw come after spring? I think Crenshaw was a winter edition, right?
He was December 17th.
Yeah. Okay. Now what is it saying? Like I think, let me put it this way: I really hope Fletcher Westphal is the guy to secure that what we assume will be the right tackle job, because I think it would maybe show something not great if he doesn't. I mean, like you said, Cam Waits. I mean, we've seen it. I'm not saying guys can't get better as veterans, as upperclassmen, but what we saw was not good. Dev Manuel, like, we'll see. Veteran guy, like you said, SEC experience, like not like a bad football player, but probably not ideally what you want if you're developing talent at the position. I think Westfall is definitely the next like guy up that in terms of guys Billy's recruited and developed. He's certainly the guy that you would expect to be the next up to take that job, and is the most experienced of that kind of group competing for it, outside of Cam Waits, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, like, I think a lot of questions outside of Austin Barber. I mean, obviously a position where Florida hasn't recruited like at a super high level. I know they were trying to go after Solomon Thomas, would have been pretty far and away the highest level.
He would have been interior.
Okay, true. He was listed as a no tackle, but yeah, would have been interior. I guess, like, regardless, like, haven't landed a lot of like super high tier offensive line recruits just in general under Billy Napier. So there's not like these elite recruits that are there waiting in the wings, but Fletcher Westfall's a guy that they seem to be really high on.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, I also mentioned Caden Jones. He was a 4-star, low 4-star, but like higher than a lot of the guys on the roster. Yeah, exactly, Rob. We're just done with the weights experiment. Like, yeah, exactly. So Caden Jones, he was a 4-star. So was Marcus Maskell. Although I do think Maskell needs more development. Was in that same class as Westfall, a year younger than Caden, and it was also a lower ranked 4-star. I think the offensive line recruiting has been better than it was under Mullen. Although I would like to see it get better. I mean, we're probably going to be taking like 5 offensive linemen in this recruiting cycle. So if we can like land, did I do that or? Whoops. If we can land like 4 stars in this cycle, maybe. I mean, I doubt 5-star. Like, I'm not going to even suggest it, but like if we can land like 4 stars, like 2 guys in it, like top 200 area, like Westfall was and Roderick Kearney was, I'll feel a lot better, like, and more solidified about the offensive line recruiting than like where I'm at right now. So I'm pretty confident Westfall, if we don't get a transfer, is going to be that guy. And we also do have some other young players, some freshmen we're bringing in. Tavares Dice, listed as an offensive tackle in 247. I've heard it's going to be like a flex, can play guard and tackle, and that's why we decided to go with him instead of spending the extra money on Solomon Thomas. We saw more value in what we're paying and what we're getting. And another 3-star freshman in Jahari Medlock. We'll see what we get from Medlock. I mean, we've seen guys develop as 3 stars from Billy, like Kinjaya Harris and Bryce Levette has developed pretty nicely at guard. Overall, the offensive tackle room, I think Barber is probably like an A-. And then that unknown spot, probably going to be either a transfer or like Westfall, a guy they're pretty high on. As like I'm going to go B+. And that's pretty solid.
Yeah, I'm at a B for the room as a whole. Okay. Yeah, I'm at a B. I mean, because I like Barber. I think Barber's a really reliable player. Yeah. I think, like, I don't think it's necessarily going to be bad at that other spot, but it's another spot where we kind of thought they were going to go get a transfer and they didn't. So there's not a lot of experience coming back in this. So it's just a big question mark. So I think B+ is fine. I think going any higher than that would kind of be wish casting, just because I think there's too many question marks. But I feel comfortable at B because I think at least one of those 2 guys is going to be like all SEC caliber, hopefully, or at least you certainly believe that.
I think I'd go B+ because, again, I saw like mock drafts having Austin Barber as like a potential 1st-round pick. And then like Westfall's a pretty highly rated guy. So like I'm going to give him a little bit more of a benefit of a doubt than you normally would for other players that we will see. All right, let's go to the offensive guards position. Now, this is a pretty good spot for us. I mean, The whole interior. Should we include centers in this, or should we do centers?
Yeah,
individually?
let's just include centers because there's not as much to talk about with centers.
Actually, I'll just quickly do centers. Jake Slaughter, and then Jason Zandamela / Roger Kearney. I'm gonna go A+. Jake Slaughter, first team, All-American, got his brick. And then you look at Jason Zandamela, who I think is the guy in waiting after Slaughter leaves. He was a top 50 recruit, top 100 recruit. Got in the transfer after his first spring, so didn't even burn any years or anything at USC. Kind of just judging based on his high school ranking. But with the development we've had on the offensive line, and even if it's Roger Kearney instead, I've heard a lot of good things about Kearney. He's just stuck behind some good guards. So, center, I'm just going to give it A+. I'll let you.
Yeah, no disagreements there. Jake Slaughter, probably the best center in college football coming into next season. And it's not like a full position group to evaluate like guard or tackle, but I think you feel as good as you can about a backup offensive lineman that lacked the experience. You feel about as good as you can with who's behind him. So I think A+ is totally fair there. Maybe the strongest position maybe on the entire team, honestly.
Absolutely. Okay. So now we go to the offensive guards. The two starters, I'm pretty confident that we're going to be starting. Damian George, Kanjaya Harris, you returned both of them from this season. You saw both of these guys really improve throughout the season. And at the end of the year, they were both playing really good football with George at right guard and Harris at left guard. Being next to an All-American center also obviously helps. But I think where things get interesting is you have Bryce Levette, who played some really good snaps. I'm not going to judge his guard ability based on what we saw in the bowl game when he was playing right tackle. But when we saw him at guard this year, I really liked what I saw from him. This is a guy that I think probably will end up starting in the 2026 season. So it's someone I'm really happy with. Roger Kearney is such a weird one to me because we've seen players in interviews say, who's the toughest guy one-on-one? We saw defensive linemen do these interviews, and they're like, Roger Kearney and Damian George as well. But Roger Kearney, they're saying one of the strongest players on the team and one of the hardest guys to go against one-on-one. So I assume he's going to be it's weird then seeing him be the backup to Kanjaya Harris because they were both part of that same recruiting class, if I'm not mistaken. And, Kearney obviously, I think, was the 121st ranked prospect in his class. He's the highest offensive lineman we had attained since Richard Garage, I think. So, it's a guy we had a lot of hope for. And I'm going to assume he's as good as they're making it sound he is. And I'm going to be really happy with this offensive guard unit you're going to see take on the field.
Really solid. Really solid 2 deep, honestly, here. I think you feel pretty good about 4 or 5 guys here. I think the starters, we expect Harris and George are going to start. I think, George had a pretty rough year in 2022 playing tackle. Was a lot, 2023 playing tackle.
Yeah.
And, I'm not sure he was incredible this season at guard, but I think certainly was a lot better playing at guard. Was a nice addition, I guess you could say, to get him back, coming back this season because he initially entered the portal.
His agent entered him into the portal or announced he was entering the portal. He didn't enter the portal himself.
Okay. So some interesting stuff going on.
He fired his agent that next day.
Yeah. So, I think both these guys are solid. I don't think we've talked about this on the show. I still don't think it's entirely out of the question that Bryce Lovett beats one of them out for a starting job potentially. I think that's it. If you had to ask me, where on this position could an incumbent starter get unseated, I'd probably say one of the guard spots is fairly high on the list.
I don't think George gets beat for a spot. I'm very confident George starts. If one does get beat out, it's going to be Harris.
Yeah.
I think George played really well to end that year last year. I think he's going to be someone that's going to be getting serious NFL attention.
But again, that isn't even being critical of the guys starting. It's more a function of how good the depth is here, that there's guys that could contend there. So all that being said, I think I'm at an A- here.
Oh well, okay. I'm gonna go through the rest of the interior.
Oh,
offensive line really.
sorry.
You have Christian Williams, who's been a guy who was with Billy, who committed to Billy as like a low 3-star to Louisiana, followed him here. He's just been a guy, scout team guy, I suspect, a good guy in practice. I don't think he entered the transfer portal. So like I'm pretty sure of that. And then you also have 2 foreign guys, I guess. Noel Portenjagen from Germany and Enoch Wangoy from England. I've heard a lot of people actually really like Noel, like for the future as he progresses. So maybe he's a guy that could develop and be a pretty good player for us. And then you bring in true freshman Daniel Pierre-Louis. I heard Bud Elliott during the what is it? On December 4th. Goodness, it just took my mind. National Signing Day. He was doing the show and everything, and they were talking about Florida and how they flipped so many kids, and they were asking like, who's the underrated player in Florida's class? He was talking about when Pierre-Louis was committed to FSU, he was like one of his most underrated players. So I think we might be underrating Pierre-Louis a little bit, maybe. I mean, again, this offensive guard group is really good and still pretty young, so it's going to be 2 years until he probably sees the field if he's still here.
Yeah.
But it's someone that maybe we should keep an eye out and not just forget about him because of his ranking.
Yeah, and I mean, regardless of ranking, like most of these true freshman offensive linemen probably aren't going to play at all.
No.
Or if they will, it will be extremely limited. You just don't see that very often in the SEC, especially. So, I think like when I'm making my grades for these positions, the incoming freshmen don't really factor too much into it because they don't really factor into like how the actual position, outlook is in this coming season, I guess.
Besides maybe the next position.
Yeah, that is true.
So you're giving it an A-.
Oh, I'm only saying that regards to offensive linemen that I don't take the freshmen into account. Yeah.
So how'd you grade LSU going into 2022?
LSU, wait, their offensive line?
Yeah, because they had Will Campbell.
I see your point. I see your point. That's kind of I'd say that's a edge case.
All right, so you're giving an A-.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at. I think the starters here are solid. I think the depth is solid. Like you got to get 4 or 5 deep before you start getting to someone that I really don't feel good about playing significant snaps here. So I think maybe no one's elite in that group, and that's why it's not higher than that. But I think really solid across the board.
I'm also gonna go A- because of what you said. There's nobody elite, although I do think Damian George could be an NFL prospect. Kind of like how Brendan Crenshaw Dixon is. Like he's a projected like 4th or 5th round pick. That's where I think George could work himself to be. Still was a 4-star recruit out of high school as well. So he was a talented guy. I'm gonna go A- as well.
Yeah.
Now, maybe the most interesting position group to look at here, the wide receivers. The only name I'm gonna say that's gonna start surefire is Trey Wilson. He's going to be starting in that slot position. How much he improves or how much like his route running has improved throughout the years dealing with multiple injuries. He did miss some games his freshman year, missed 8 games this past season. I think he played some games, but didn't really touch the ball at all. I think it was more of a distraction for other teams with Trey Wilson. But, Trey Wilson starting your slot, definitely a solid guy, a good. He's probably going to be someone that you're seeing drafted, a projected draft pick in like those 3rd or 4th rounds where you see those gadget guys go. But he's not going to be that number 1 guy. The next guy I'm going to go to, J. Michael Sturdivant. He's that higher upside, lower floor type of, lower ceiling type of guy that you're getting who draft analysts love. He's like, oh my God, if you can develop him, he could be one of the better receivers in the NFL, like getting those 3rd round pick type. We'll see how we develop him. I mean, Billy Gonzalez has been a really good developer in his 17 years at Florida. No, I don't think it's 17, but still, like in his 10 plus years he's been a coach at Florida. He's been a guy we've seen develop a lot of players. So I think we will get a good development out of Sturdivant. But then that last wide receiver position, I think, is where it gets interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just starting with those first 2 guys, I think this is kind of like the recurring theme throughout the receiver room. There's very much a like because I think this receiver room, if like everything goes well, it could be
Oh my God,
incredibly good.
yes,
But
absolutely.
there's just almost pretty much everyone we talk about. It's like, well, I see the ceiling, like I see how this could be good, but
I also see how it can be bad.
There's usually a pretty big but there. Like with Trey Wilson, it's he has not really managed to A, stay healthy, and B, like prove he can be a consistent, I guess more than like you kind of called him a gadget guy, like prove that he can be more than just sort of an offensive gimmick, like it can be a true receiver who's going to stretch the field and cause you problems. I think Sturdivant, it's like, I mean, the measurables are there, the talent's there,
Speed's
but his
there.
production's gone steadily down since his first year in college at Cal, and then going into his career at UCLA, it didn't really work out as well there. So it's like, can he get it back now that he's playing with what I would say is pretty clearly the most talented quarterback he'll have played with in his whole career? And then when you get beyond that, it's guys, going up next. I would assume the next guy you would want to talk about would be Aiden Mizell.
That's where I was gonna go. You do have Aiden Mizell returning. We saw a bunch of flashes from him. I think it hurt Mizell when Lagway was in because Lagway's only getting 10 completions a game, basically. Until later in the like the bowl game and Ole Miss game, we got a couple more. But Lagway, he's only given the ball so many times. And when you have guys like Elijah Badger and Chimere Dike, who are probably going to be drafted, it's tougher to be the final person to get the ball. But I mean, we do see that upside for Mizell as well. He has that really good speed, really good 6'2", 6'3" height, good height, and the elusiveness. I mean, the play against Mississippi State that was taken back by the bogus blocking back, like that play alone is like, oh my God, how is this guy not getting 5-10 touches a game? I mean, it's there for Mizell. And I'm honestly not sure why we didn't try to get him the ball more. I mean, I guess I get why, because we had so many different targets. So maybe we do see us try to get him the ball more this year, but I'm not even sure if he's going to start.
Yeah. You saw the deep balls against Samford and in the Georgia game too, before Lagway got hurt. Like there were moments where he looked really promising. It's just, he hasn't been able to stay on the field consistently and be consistently productive when he's there. So it's like, I see a guy with a really high upside here, but do you trust it? Like, I don't know if I trust it, because it hasn't been done for more than just, a flash here and there.
So again, this is like where things really get interesting. So I'm going to talk about 4 guys here that are also probably contending for that final spot. Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown, I think even Nashawn Montgomery, maybe a name people forgot about, Khalil Jackson. Those are like, it's 5 guys with Aiden Mizell that are, you could tell me any of them are starting for that week 1 game and I'd believe you. Like, it's very competitive, but it's not as competitive like the offensive line group or offensive guard group, where like we've seen these guys be really good. Like Bryce Levette, when we saw him play, he was really good. And say like Roger Kearney, we're hearing so much about him in practice. It's okay, Dallas Wilson, high-ranked receiver. Vernell Brown, high-ranked receiver. Nashawn Montgomery, probably very underrated receiver. Should be like top 100 level guy. We saw in the All-American game, he was maybe the best receiver there. And then Khalil Jackson, the guy who's been with the program 4 years and was starting when healthy. Should he have been starting? That's the question, but I'll let you get into this.
Yeah, well, now that you mention it, like, I just can't escape the thought that the number 3 receiver on opening day is 100% going to be Khalil Jackson.
That's
it is 100%. I would bet anything on that right now. Yeah. I'm not sure it stays that way, but I'd bet almost anything that's what Billy does in his week 1 depth chart.
We have 2 weeks to get ready for Death Valley. So hopefully, unless he just is really good, I mean,
and he's not bad. Like he's a veteran who's had some nice moments. He's a reliable guy. But I think it's not like he's bad. It just would say to me a lot about where Aiden Mizell is, about, maybe these freshmen are not really ready to
where Billy is.
Yeah. Like where Billy's headspace is at. Yeah, I would give me a lot of questions. I mean, I'd love to see Mizell take that step. I mean, I think you're going to see the freshmen like Vernell Brown and Dallas Wilson, and maybe to an extent Montgomery. He might be a little buried, a little lost in translation here. But I think especially Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown, like I think you're going to see them. I think they're going to make some sort of impact.
Sure.
I don't know. You just don't know. Like it's just we've seen a lot of different. I mean, obviously, for every Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams, there are guys that are just not, for one reason or another, are just not there as true freshmen. And neither of these guys were, they're both either 5 or like fringe 4 or 5 stars, kind of on that dividing line. None of them are kind of that elite, like top 5 overall player that you kind of expect is just too good to keep off the field. I still kind of do suspect that at least one or both of them will be too good to keep off the field. But I'm not putting stock in them. Like I'm not banking my opinions on the offense off of like one of the two of them becoming very productive this year. But I think if the offense is going to reach its ceiling, you're probably going to see one or both of them become pretty impactful this year. So
I don't remember who it is. I'm trying to find it. It's such a small thing to look for. But I know Nashawn Montgomery is supposed to be working with some like former really good wide receiver during the summer, to help improve his game. That's like also a part of the fact that we already saw him be really good with other high level recruits in those All-American games. And the fact that he's going to be working with one of the better receivers in NFL history. No, I think it's Justin Jefferson.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I think that's who it was. I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be working with Justin Jefferson this offseason to help improve. And I mean, Justin Jefferson has some of the best footwork in the NFL, which is like I think we saw a good bit from Nashawn here. So that's why like I'm pretty high on him from what we've already seen him do to what he also will be learning this offseason. But man, Zach, like Khalil Jackson starting, it's like you're in a maze. You finally start going somewhere and it's like, oh, okay, I think I'm finally making my way. And it's like you see light, like you think you're at the end of the maze. You get there and it's just like a light bulb and it's a dead end. And it's Khalil Jackson. Like, you continue the maze and try to figure out when you do get there, it's going to be awesome. But you just hit like another roadblock. And that's what it feels like Khalil Jackson was when he was announced as a starter and started this season over Elijah Badger. And if he starts over like Aiden Mizell, Dallas Wilson, or Vernell Brown, or Nashawn Montgomery, it's going to be something that a lot of fans are going to be really negative towards. Whether they should be, whether they should be is a question. I mean, again, he's a solid receiver. And, it's also, we're playing these weaker opponents the first 2 weeks. So it's like, you have those extra games to get ready for the LSU game. But it's also like you're playing these weaker opponents. You should be testing out the less experienced players. Like that's when it's like, what Khalil Jackson is. You don't need to see him go on the field. But if you see Dallas Wilson go out and he goes for 100 yards in his first career game, it's like, oh, well, I mean, we have something really good here,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with this room. I hope it's one of the younger guys that end up starting. Like, I'm not going to put too much investment into those first 2 depth charts, or if we even get depth charts, because how Billy decided to end the season after his first 2 weeks not producing them. Or did he produce one for the second game against Stanford?
I think
he did. He did. He definitely did, but then didn't. So maybe we'll just get one week 1 and we'll go the rest of the season. I think also some younger guys, TJ Abrams and Tank Hawkins. They should be solid depth pieces at the slot. I mean, maybe Abrams can go outside a little bit, but I don't think we see him much out there. But Tank Hawkins, I expect to get some good minutes behind Trey, especially with Trey's injury history. There's going to be some games where he's not going to get a bunch of snaps. So,
Tank had the one nice play in the Sanford game.
Who didn't?
Yeah, very true.
And then you also add another freshman, who is Tanakora, a 3-star guy who has like those measurables like we talked about with Ada Mizell, has the height, has the speed, less developed. I doubt we see him this season except like
Probably not.
blowouts, which even then we have a lot of other guys who will get playing time over him. So overall, I'm going to give the wide receiver room. It's such a tough position because we could come back at the end of the season. Hell, heck, we can come back at the end of the spring and we see like Dallas Wilson or Vernell Brown go for like 100 yards this spring game. It's like, okay, that's the guy. And it's like how Jaden Ball was, where it's like, it's a spring game, so how much can you take away from it? But it's like he just looked different out there. So I was like, I could give it a B and then come back 3 months later and it's like, oh, this room's obviously an A. I'm going to go B plus because there's so much talent. And, it's like if it ends up just being a B, I can be like, okay. But like if I picked a B and it's an A, like I'll be upset with myself.
Yeah, I'm a bit lower. I'm at a B minus.
Okay.
And I'm with you in the sense that like this could 100% be an A by the end of the season. I just I have to look at the pieces that are there, and there's not enough. Like Trey has had really good moments, hasn't necessarily proven he can be like a number one leading receiver, and hasn't proven that he can stay healthy. Aiden hasn't proven enough. J. Michael Sturdivant, like I'm pretty high on him. Like I'm honestly probably the highest on him. I'm the most certain that he has a productive season of anyone in this receiver room, because I think that, first of all, the staff has just kind of nailed their receiver transfer evaluations. Like credit where it's due. Their receiver transfer evaluations have been really good.
Ty Jacob Bowman.
Yeah, there you go. No, but I mean, aside from that, no, like they just seem to do well with these guys. He seems to kind of fit the bill, and he reminds me of the previous transfers they've gotten that they've had success with. Because I talked about he's good, but I mean the same was true for Chimere Dike. The same was true for Elijah Badger. Dike was coming off a step back season in terms of production, and Elijah Badger had a pretty serious injury history. DK had the best season of his career, I believe. And then Badger, I mean, I think had maybe one or two games.
Badger missed the Texas game.
Yeah, but like nothing super serious for Badger. So he managed to stay healthy too. So like, I guess this is a long-winded way of saying that there's not a guy that I feel just so great about. And I think if I had to bet on it, I'd say one of the freshmen makes a pretty big impact this year. There's too much uncertainty for me to go much higher than B minus, just because if there was one guy coming back that had 900 yards last year, I'd feel a little bit differently, but that guy just doesn't really exist. So.
Gotcha. So to recap, B plus, B minus.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to ask you, who is your prediction of the freshmen or young receivers to step up? Of any of the four freshmen, or like Ada Mizell, even Tank Hawkins or TJ Abrams, if you want.
I think of all those people, if I had to bet, I'd say that Mizell has the biggest season.
Mizell, okay. Yeah, that's a fair bet.
I mean, not exactly breaking ground here, but I'd say that Dallas Wilson is by far the most intriguing player to me in that group. Like the one whose talent I'm most intrigued by, but like just being realistic, I think Mizell's going to play a pretty big role, because I don't really think there's anyone on this team that's kind of good at the things that he's good at. Like I think Mizell kind of has a role of his own potentially in this offense. So I'd say he's the one I'm highest on, but it also at the same time wouldn't surprise me if he's supplanted by a Vernell Brown or a Dallas Wilson.
Take away Mizell, just a freshman.
Just the freshman? Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's Dallas Wilson.
Dallas Wilson, okay.
Yeah, it is Dallas Wilson. I mean, I like Vernell Brown, and actually Vernell Brown, with the way Dallas Wilson's fallen kind of at the end of the cycle, Vernell Brown is either ranking ahead of him or right in lockstep with him. So he's ahead of him on 3. I saw that today.
The 247 composite, I think Dallas Wilson fell from 5-star status.
Yeah, he did. He did.
And Vernell Brown is a 5-star now.
Yeah, so Dallas Wilson's 41, a 4-star, and Vernell Brown is 30, a 5-star in the on-3 industry. So I still kind of think Dallas
247 composite. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, but I'm saying both. So both of them, I'm saying that he lost his 5th star.
Dallas
And
is 35th on the 247 composite,
Okay.
and Vernell's 30th.
Yeah, I still, to be honest, though, I don't quite understand why. I still kind of think he's got the skill set that is the most tantalizing here.
Yeah. I'm gonna go Nashon. I'm really high on Nashon, man. I think
More so than Dallas Wilson and
as
Vernell
a
Brown?
freshman, I do think there's some things that Dallas, like, I don't know if his footwork is going to be ready. Like, the physicality's there, but I don't see him being physical enough. I'm sorry. I don't see him being fundamental enough to play in the SEC. Vernell Brown, I'm like really close on as well, because I think he does have better footwork and big playability.
Okay.
So but I think Nashon has a good bit of everything. Good size, like 6'2.5". I think is what he's listed at. I think 247, like, and on 3 have him lower. So I think he measured in at the All-American game a bit higher than they had him originally. But
He's only listed at 6'1" by on.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's like 6'3" or like 6'2 3/4. I think he grew a bit from when they last inserted those rankings. But then again, also working with Justin Jefferson, it's like I think he's gonna be that guy. I think he's gonna be that guy early too.
I like the pick.
All right. Do you have anything you want to say to wrap up this longest stream we've had in a while since like the football season?
A lot going on. Relatively eventful for the middle of the off season. Yeah, I mean, we're just starting to get closer to spring, and the news is picking up. We'll have more to talk about as we get closer. But I think, today was a good place to start. I think the offense is really an intriguing group looking ahead. With what you've got in DJ, with the young receivers, with a pretty experienced offensive line, and the running back room that we both agree is among the deepest in America. Like, a lot to be excited about. So we'll just have to see how it all works out in spring. And obviously with basketball and baseball starting too, a couple sports that should be fun to kind of watch as the basketball season finishes and baseball season progresses over the next couple weeks and months.
Absolutely. We will be back next Sunday, right? You should be good next Sunday as well.
Should be good for
next Sunday, same time. We're also going to be doing our front seven. Maybe we'll do the whole defense. This did go pretty long, so I think we'll just do the front seven next week.
Yeah.
For the predictions and our grading and breakdown. We hope you guys enjoyed the stream. If you haven't already, make sure you like this video, like other videos. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And as always, go Gators.